privilege and honor to introduce our esteemed guest for the night, Dr. Abdullah Ali. Dr. Abdullah Ali is a scholar of Islamic law with field specialties in Islamic theology, as well as race and blackness studies in Muslim history. His research interests include the interconnection between law and identity formation, comparative Islamic law, and Islam's role in the modern world. At Zaytuna College, Dr. Ali teaches jurisprudential principles, family law, inheritance law, commercial law, prophetic tradition, creedal theology, and Islamic virtue ethics. He received his BA or Ijaza from Al-Qarawiyyin University in Sharia in 2001, and then received both his MA and PhD from the GTU, the Graduate Theological Union, in 2012 and 2016 respectively. Prior to his post at Zaytuna, Dr. Ali was a chaplain at State Correctional Institute in Chester, Pennsylvania from 2002 to 2007. Lastly, his PhD thesis, titled The Negro in Afro-Arabian Muslim Consciousness, demonstrates the interplay between conceptions and perceptions of race in constructing class differences. It is an example of how race taxonomies are constructed and employed to impress upon people's psychological states and socio-cultural sensibilities. It aims to uncover how indigenous Black African Muslims responded to the challenges to their humanity and agency by their Arab co-religionists who saw themselves as ethnically and culturally superior to their brethren. Dr. Ali is fluent in Arabic and joined Zaytuna in 2007, and now we're honored and blessed really to have him here at Yasin tonight. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Ali, for coming.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد خير الأولين والآخرين.
افتح علينا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين وانفعنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, it's a great honor to be here at the Yasin Foundation. Actually, years ago, I don't know if y'all still utilize the public space. There used to be a hall that you used to pray Jumu'ah, and so I used to come to deliver the khutbah from time to time. Yeah, so it's been a number of years now since I've actually done anything in association with the Yasin Foundation. It's really nice to sort of reconnect with the community. And also, of course, Dr. Rami Salah, I was really shocked or surprised to see him here today. He used to be one of my former colleagues at Zaytuna College. He used to work there, about 10 years ago, so it's been almost 10 years since we've seen one another last time. So this is really a nice pleasure to come here and to meet, to see him again. Really delightful, so he gets a chance now to see my son. He's known my daughter for some years ago, she probably doesn't remember him, but alhamdulillah, we're here for this special program, which has been entitled Choosing Islam. And as highlighted and indicated in my bio, I teach Islamic law and prophetic tradition, among other things, at Zaytuna College, family law, commercial law, inheritance law. We call it jurisprudential principles, theology, virtue ethics. And so I naturally tried to understand Islam in a very holistic fashion, in that Islam is not only fiqh, it's not only jurisprudence, Islam is not only aqidah, creed, Islam is not only our virtue ethics, right? It's all those things together. It's important for us to make sure that we see the sort of interplay between all of those things. Now, one of the great blessings, the most important and greatest of blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the human being after giving us life and health and safety, among other things, is the freedom to choose. The ability to choose to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also the ability to disobey. And that is a great amana, that is a great trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed upon the human being, The Quran teaches us that he had presented the trust to the heavens and the earth and to the mountains, and they refused to bear it, and they were fearful and they were anxious about it. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ But man, he undertook this burden of choice, the burden of reward because of our decisions, the burden of punishment because of our decisions. Now, the idea of choosing Islam, of course, perhaps it brings to mind ideas about conversion. And we're having an earlier conversation, myself and Brother Mutayr, may Allah preserve him, and he had asked me to sort of mention a conversion story. But of course, he didn't know at the time that I'm not a convert. But I told him as well that even though I'm not a convert, being someone who was born Muslim to two Muslim parents, I did have conversion experience. And I do believe that every Muslim in his or her life will also have conversion experiences if you haven't already had yours. So in that sense, all of us are converts in one sense. The Sahaba were converts, right? That they entered into Islam, that there were people who embraced the message of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam under great social pressure not to do so. Some of them had tribes to protect them, others did not have tribes to protect them, like people such as Yasser, Ammar ibn Yasser and his family, Bilal ibn Rabah, and his brother, his sister. They didn't have the protection, the tribal protection that others had, so for that reason, it made them very fair game, when they themselves would come out publicly and express that I am a Muslim. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is another one of those, who didn't have the tribal protection, despite being an Arab himself. So people, they took a great gamble, we would say, right? But a gamble for the sake of their salvation, the salvation of their souls. Because the people who didn't believe in the hereafter, all of a sudden now convinced that there is life after death, that there is heaven and hell, when they didn't believe it before, that there's only one God after they believed that there were 360 idols who shared the Godhead, or the sort of a pantheon. That it was a great revolutionary moment in human history, not just Muslim history, but human history, because the messenger is the messenger of all, to all humanity. He's rahmatan, he's rahmatan al-alameen. He's been sent kafatan lin-nasi, bashira wa nadhira. He's sent to all of humanity as a bringer of good news and as a warner. So he is a messenger to all of humanity. And I did want to begin with a little bit about sort of like my story. As I talk about the idea of conversion. But as I stated before, my parents were Muslims, but they didn't come through Islam in the way that you may expect. That my mother and father originally were Christian, and they themselves were introduced to a movement called the Nation of Islam, and in particular what they call the First Resurrection, that particular movement. And so this was the Nation of Islam in its original form, by following the man that they called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who they themselves believed was the messenger of God. And of course they believed that in a different way that we understand it, right? At the time, even though in one conversation I had with my father, I was under the impression that he literally believed that God, the creator of the universe, actually did send this man. And was himself a true messenger, And my father struggled with this for much of his life after his transition, right, from the Nation of Islam teachings into Sunni Islam, when Imam W.D. Muhammad, may Allah have mercy on him, had brought so many of the members of the Nation of Islam into Sunni Islam. But at any rate, I am one of 7 siblings. I'm the youngest boy. I have 2 younger sisters, but I have we have 4 boys, 3 girls. The youngest boy in our family. We grew up in a way that we perhaps would say sort of like cultural Muslims, and perhaps most of you have grown up as cultural Muslims too, in the sense that, you identify with Islam, it's like Islam is sort of, it's automatic, it's just what you are, right? Regardless of what you're doing, regardless of whether or not you're praying, regardless of whether or not you're walking the straight and narrow, as we say, so we were brought up in that way, that we were brought up, to be totally honest, in such a way that the only way that you would know the difference between us and a normal Christian American would be that we said that God was Allah. There was no Trinity. We didn't believe in Jesus, and we didn't eat pork. That was the three main issues, right? But at a certain point in my life, my teenage years, when I was about 13 years old, I met a family, during my breakdance days. Yes, I used to be a break dancer, used to be a rapper on top of that, right? During my breakdance days, I met a family. So one of the members of this other crew that we challenged to a battle, we were battling outside of, we call it battle, when you dance, the dance off, not physically fighting, but we had a battle with them. And one of the members of that particular crew had overheard that I was Muslim, and then they told their mother, and their mother invited me inside the house. And when I came inside the house, I saw them making salat. And now we grew up, and the only person in our family who made salat was my father, rahimahullah. But he never imposed it upon us. He never told us that, you all need to do the same thing. And perhaps it's because he felt, inadequate in the sense that he had just transitioned from the Nation of Islam, and perhaps he felt that he didn't want to impose or indoctrinate us into something new, and then only to discover maybe in the future that maybe that wasn't true as well. I don't know really how he was thinking, but he was the only one that made salat in the house. So by this time, on my breakdancing days, he and my mother had already divorced. He had moved out. She was living with my grandmother, and so I see them making salat. I say, my father used to do that. My father used to pray. So I started to come to their home. I started to frequent their home. And of course, my crew, they thought that I was defecting, right? And they heard that I was going to their house all the time, them not understanding that, I'm a Muslim, I'm trying to learn my religion. But they said, they kicked me out of the group. They said, no, you're not one of us anymore. And actually, they wanted to fight because they thought I was defecting. And I said, okay, no problem, I'll defect. Now I'm on their side. So I started to learn more and more. And then eventually, I guess by the time when I was about 15, was the very first time I saw a Quran in the Arabic language. And I was like, whoa, what is that? And I saw the Arabic script, and I didn't know anything about Arabic script. And I said, well, it actually says something? They said, yes, actually, this is the real Quran. This is written in this way. And I became very mystified by that. And I wanted to learn how to read the Quran. So I undertook the great task of trying to teach myself Arabic, right? So I found a book that was called Easy Tajweed. And I remember at the beginning of that book, at the start in the book, there was a section for, they had Arabic alphabet, and ways to link the letters, So I started to practice writing the alphabet. I would write each letter like 15 times, and I was really hoping that I would find a teacher. And within 2 weeks of that, someone had come to me and told me that, hey, at the Sister Claire Muhammad School, there's a teacher, an Arabic teacher there. He's from Eritrea, who studied in Egypt, and we called the people in the city called me Imam Barra. Imam wasn't his title, it was his name, Imam Barra. So I started to study formally with the teacher. So that went on for a number of years. But of course, as I grew, all of my friends were Muslims, being Muslims, and everybody is of different degrees of piety. We do our things, right? We're not completely on the straight and narrow. We hang out, we do different things, right? And perhaps some of the some young brothers can relate to that, right? But eventually, what happened was that I started to struggle with my faith in the sense that I started to doubt the existence of God. Now, the reason I say that the seeds of doubt, I would say, were planted within me when I was very young. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I think I was maybe 7 at the time. And the only word for God that I had known up to that point was Allah. And I started to hear it more and more often, God, 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 God. What's God? It was as if I intuitively knew what it meant, but at the same time, I didn't know what it meant. So I went to my father and asked my father, and said, well, what's God? And so he said something to me which sounded like this: there's no such thing as God, only Allah. No, I'm almost certain he didn't say that to me. So maybe I was 5, I was 4, I don't remember. I just know I was very young. I was young enough to confuse what my father was saying to me. And I understood him to say that God didn't exist, right? Even though he said only Allah, to me it sounded like still no God, right? And being a young, impressionable child, I said, well, this is Dad. Dad knows everything, right? So if Dad said there's no God, there can't be, there's no God. So as years went by, now I'm 9 years old, and I remember exactly how old I was now. Now, 9 years old, I'm walking down the street with my cousin in Chicago, because I lived in Chicago my first 11 years, and then eventually I go to Philadelphia and grew up in Philadelphia. But walking down the street with my cousin, and I say to my cousin, I say, hey, David. I said, he's 7, I'm 9, so we're having this theological conversation. So I say to him, hey, David, do you believe in God? And he said, yeah, man, I believe in God. And I said, I believe in God too, me too, So it was like my first act of defiance against my dad, right? It's like, well, yeah, Dad doesn't believe in God. Well, I believe in God, right? So, but eventually what happened is that once I started to learn about Islam in my teenage years, eventually what happens is that those doubts started to come back. And then eventually what happened was that I started to have some very strange dreams, right? And I had some strange experiences that I really, would rather not share, right? Because I don't want anybody to think I'm sort of weird, But I started to have some very strange things happen, dreams and certain things that happened when I was awake as well, which led me to conclude that God must be real. So when I was actually 15 years old, even though I had already been praying and fasting, I actually did decide. I went to the masjid and I told the imam or the people in the masjid, I said, yeah, I want to take my shahada. Right? So I did actually sort of convert in a sense, right? And so they gave me shahada, right? Even though I really didn't need to take it, but I did it anyway. All my brothers and sisters, with the exception of one, continue to identify as Muslims. So that's because one part of, I would say, sort of me choosing Islam sort of started that way. But at the same time, I would say that when we reflect upon the fact that today so many non-Muslims, popular non-Muslims, influencers, right, are becoming Muslim, that it should be an important moment for a great and deep reflections for Muslims ourselves, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses you for Islam. You may feel at times like, well, alhamdulillah, my dad, my mom's Muslims, my grandparents were Muslims, my great-grandparents were Muslims, and so, this is what we are, right? And as if, hey, well, nobody can take that away from me. But yes, you can. Somebody can. Allah can take it away from you, right? وإن تتولوا يستبدل قوما غيركم ثم لا يكونوا أمثالكم. If you turn your backs, then He will replace you with a people who won't be like you. Allah tells you that. That if whoever among you who leaves your religion, then Allah will bring forward a people other than yourselves. He will love them, they will love Him, right? So there's no guarantee that anybody remains Muslim, right? But usually when you looked at the non-Muslims who are accepting Islam today, these popular non-Muslims, regardless of how you feel about them, Andrew Tate and others like that, becoming like Muslims, is that typically the reason that they become Muslim is because they've realized that a life of hedonism, a life of just simply overindulgence, is not fulfilling. But also that God is real and God should be feared. God should be obeyed. And in particular, in this man's case, he says that Islam is the only religion whose members actually take that religion seriously, who actually get angry when God is blasphemed, who get angry when the prophet is disparaged, et cetera, right? You know, but a part of that too is that there's something, a certain type of lifestyle that people are living, and they decide that they're going to abandon that path. When I grew up in Philadelphia, you would almost never see a Muslim smoking in public, right? As a matter of fact, they saw Muslims as decent people who are always involved with good things. And now, of course, the Nation of Islam had a lot to do with that, because there was a very strong focus on discipline. But the non-Muslims were associating this with all the Muslims. You know, if there was a Muslim who smoked, you probably will only find out if you visit their home, right? Oh, this person smokes, right? Or a person may still be having some alcohol problems, et cetera. You know, but publicly, Muslims are very concerned about the image of Islam on the outside of the home. And so, in other words, brings me to this, which is that if you were to ask a person, what special things does Islam bring to the world today? What special does Islam have to offer the world today? We won't say that Islam offers the same thing that Christianity does, except that our theology is better, you know, or that, which is one thing, it is, you know, better, our theology is better, or that it's better than Judaism or this other religion, except of, again, that, you know, there's more rationality involved, you know, in our religion. You know, you don't just sort of have to operate as a fideist, right? An individual sort of like you just, you know, every single command has no explanation. You have to do it regardless, right? You know, but rather, I would say that what Islam offers more than anything, after, of course, a proper reconnection with the Creator, is a moral framework, a reasonable moral framework that almost any person can adapt to. The world today is on a, how can we say it? It's on its way to hell because too many human beings are incapable of controlling their appetites. Too many people are incapable of controlling their anger. Too many people lack courage and allow fear to get the worst of them, right? And Islam gives you a way to deal with the world. Now, when you talk about happiness, for instance, what makes a person happy? We've been taught and duped into the belief that what makes us happy is material wealth. That's where happiness comes from. It comes from, you know, just having a lot of wealth. Getting rich, you'll be happy. It was at 50 Cent in the movie Get Rich or Die Trying, right? It's you have this idea that we have the idea of the American dream. You know, okay, you stay out of trouble, you go to school, get a good job, so you can buy a nice house, a car, get married, have kids, and spend 30 years trying to pay off your mortgage. And then by the time you're 60 or so, then you retire and live your last 10 or 15 years, you know, perhaps vacationing if you have a little bit of extra money. And that's it, that's life, you know, and you'll be happy, right? Do those things, you'll be happy. But the pre-modern period, the ancients, had a different idea of what happiness was all about. Happiness fundamentally meant for you to have mastery over yourself. That's what constituted happiness. Self-mastery, discipline. In other words, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us appetite. He's given us emotions. And the most rational of people and the most successful of people and the happiest of people are those who have mastery over those things, which are innate to them. In other words, these are the people who are truly free. You can't be happy if you're not free. And ultimate freedom is from yourself. And of course, freedom from the outside forces. But the harder struggle is to be free of your emotions, or the control of your emotions and the control of your appetites. Most of the people, or rather, the vast majority of internet use is in porn, right? 80% or more than that, pornography. People go on the internet. You go social media, it's a very toxic environment, right? Everybody's grandstanding, everybody's feeding his or her ego. Everybody can now sort of has a sense of self-importance, right? Et cetera, right? So, but the real man, the real woman is the individual who has mastery over those things. And so Islam has a clear message on this regard. In Islam, it means submission. It means submission to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's I would say that that's what it ultimately offers, because, for instance, when we think about great people, right, in human history, those who are celebrated the most are those who acted contrary to their natures. For example, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What did he do in Mecca when he conquered Mecca? And they asked his people, he's like, well, what do you think I'm going to do to you? Now, they didn't say, well, if you're going to slaughter us, of course, but they themselves, they knew what type of person he was. Akhun Kareem, Ibn Akhun Kareem. You're a generous, a noble brother, son of a noble brother. Right? So don't worry about it. I say to you, as Yusuf said to his brothers, La tathrib alaykum al-yawm. No blame, no guilting you this day. Antum tulaqa. Go, you're free to go. And so you win people's respect. Salahuddin Ayyubi. Why did the Crusaders, why does everybody remember Salahuddin Ayyubi? Because of similar reasons. Salahuddin Ayyubi, he let them go. He did what the Crusaders didn't do. Inshallah, and we'll continue after the adhan, inshallah. Bismillah. So again, the most celebrated of people in human history, not just in Islamic history, are those who acted contrary to their nature. It's one of the reasons we celebrate martyrs, fallen soldiers, those who die defending their country, because they make the ultimate sacrifice. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh is probably the only person in human history who waged war for the rights of the poor. That his apostasy wars, which they're called in Islamic history, of course, entailed, of course, fight against different factions of people. Well, one particular faction of people were Muslims who said, this zakat, was due only to the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Bakr said, no, I will fight anyone who separates between salat and zakat. Right? Anyone who denies me even a small amount of what the Prophet ﷺ had taken from them, I'm going to fight them for it. And Umar ibn Khattab was very weary about this. He was, you were fighting Muslims. And of course, eventually, Abu Bakr, he convinced Umar, that he was correct. That he was correct in this stance. Abu Bakr didn't want to take their wealth for himself. He was like, I'm going to take all of your life, I'll take, numbers of your livestock. I'm going to take some of your farm produce. I'm going to take some of your gold and your silver for me to put in my pocket. No, I'm taking it for the poor people, the recipients of zakat. Right, so he fought for that reason. Great man. Again, Yusuf alayhi salam, how he dealt with his brother, despite everything that they had done to him. Yusuf alayhi salam, he separated from his mother and from his father, from his younger brother Benjamin for years, and he's sold into slavery. Then, he's accused of rape and, placed in the prison for years, and et cetera, et cetera. All those things that happened to him because of his brothers. And then even after he reconnects with them, and they didn't realize who he was, they're still telling lies about him. Right, and so, but they finally realized, we were wrong. Allah has chosen you. Allah, He's chosen you, preferred you over us, right? Yeah. But again, Salahuddin Ayyubi, he goes, after harm is done to him and to his family as well. Then he tells those left behind the Crusaders, you have free passage back to Europe. And they remembered him. He's remembered. Why? Because he didn't do what they had done. And this is always the fear of tyrants anyway, is that the tyrant increases his or her tyranny because the tyrant finds it difficult to realize that not everyone is like him. The tyrant fears that, okay, if I allow these people who I've oppressed gain power, then they're going to exact vengeance. In most cases, this is true. It is the case. I mean, this is fundamentally what happened in America, after the emancipation of the slaves. That's really what went into the mentality, all of the retraction of all of the laws, to restrict the freedoms of blacks in the Americas. You say, well, okay, Abraham Lincoln, he set them free, set the slaves free, but then he's assassinated, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of sort of regression that happened, and it took all the way until the 60s till finally some true commitment to civil rights had occurred. Why? Because people, again, they're afraid. If we let them get equality with us, they're going to do to us exactly what we did to them. And to some extent, you can see that happening now with this, what we call the woke Inc. or the woke culture happening right now, where racism is a word which only applies to white people. Only white people can be racist, right? So a black person can be completely racist, according to the traditional definition of racism, but it's not racism. Why? Because apparently blacks don't have power, therefore they can't be racist. Because again, so this is the fears of being realized to an extent. It's the same thing as with Palestine. I would say the same thing that's happening in Palestine with the Israelis and the Palestinians, is that Israelis are afraid that, well, if we can't let them have equality because they're going to turn around and do the same thing that we're doing to them right now. It's the same thing, right? But again, people, they respect, and this is why people respect Nelson Mandela. See, again, Nelson Mandela's another one of those people. Nelson Mandela, despite everything that was done to him, he's placed into prison for 30 years, and all of a sudden comes out, becomes the president of South Africa. Now he could have said, you know what? We gotta get revenge on Whitey. We gotta get him back for everything they did to me. But he didn't do that. He did reconciliation, right? So we need to forgive. We need to move on, right? Right, and they respected him for that, but certain things are changed now in South Africa, right? Again, there are those other people who don't have the same type of moral will and emotional control, right? Someone like Nelson Mandela, right? So you see a new type of tyranny coming from those who were originally tyrannized, right? So we have to be very careful about that, and I would say that this is one of the most important and special aspects of Islam. Umar Mukhtar is another example. Umar Mukhtar, the great Libyan mujahid, right? They are not our teachers. Right? You know, he captured these Italian soldiers, and his men wanted to kill them. So why are we holding on to these captives? Why are we treating them well? So when they capture ours, they don't treat us well. They kill us. Umar Mukhtar famously tells them, they're not our teachers. They're not our teachers. This is the way we deal with our captives, right? So choosing Islam is not only choosing salvation in the hereafter, it's also about choosing peace in this world as well. Because you can't just stop at the 5 pillars. You can't just stop there. I'm a Muslim, I pray my 5 salat, I fast Ramadan, I pay zakat. When I have the surplus, I make hajj, and that's it. No, Islam is more than that. It's about that internal struggle as well, gaining mastery over ourselves. Because not only because in doing so, it pleases God, but also because when you have mastery over yourself, you are less prone to manipulation by even evil actors, right? And what I mean, I'll tell you that this is what I mean by that is, for all the people, all those young men, unfortunately, who are addicted to pornography on the internet, how did they get you? They appeal to your appetite. I mean, the desire for sexual gratification is a natural desire, right? Especially at a certain age. Once you reach a certain age, it's very natural. And so they, show you the pretty woman, pretty face, and the body, all these other, and then you get caught up in the mix of it, and then it damages you, your brain, it damages your physiology, right? Your sexual, reproductive system. It does something to it over long-term addiction. There's proof of this, scientific proof, that it can do some things to you, right? But again, how they get you because you didn't have control over yourself. You didn't learn how to turn things off, right? And just as a side note, there's some things or certain types of addictions where you could recommend to people that they gradually wean themselves off of them. Like, for instance, an alcoholic, for instance. Or let's say somebody may be addicted to heroin, right? There are ways to get you off of that. Because like, for instance, I used to work in the methadone clinic years ago. I was a security guard. So I've done a lot of things. I was a breakdancer, a rapper, I was a security guard, I was a barber, I was a painter. I've done a lot of different things, right? I used to be a chaplain, so it's time to pray, inshallah. But inshallah, yeah. But one last point. But fundamentally, it's a point I want to make before we pray is that certain things that you gradually wean yourself off of. But when it comes to that particular appetite, the sexual appetite, only cold turkey will solve the problem, because it is too strong of a passion to talk about, I'm not going to do 3 hours today, I'm only going to do 2 hours. No such thing. It's too strong of an attraction for you to do something like that. At any rate, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and protect you from succumbing to your urges, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He grant us the strength to gain mastery over our emotions and over our appetites. Barakallahu fikum.
Immediately after Aisha, we're going to continue, and then 9 o'clock we'll have Q&A. So, Abdullah. Okay, so we leave the table here. Allah.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين وما خلقنا السماوات والأرض وما بينهما إلا بالحق وإن الساعة لآتية فاصفح الصفح الجميل إن ربك هو الخلاق العليم ولقد آتيناك 7 من المثاني والقرآن العظيم لا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم ولا تحزن عليهم واخفض جناحك للمؤمنين وقل إني أنا النذير المبين كما أنزلنا على المقتسمين الذين جعلوا القرآن عضين فوربك لنسألنهم أجمعين عما كانوا يعملون فاصدع بما تؤمر وأعرض عن المشركين إنا كفيناك المستهزئين الذين يجعلون مع الله إلها آخر فسوف يعلمون ولقد نعلم أنك يضيق صدرك بما يقولون فسبح بحمد ربك وكن من الساجدين واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. واخشوا يوما لا يجزي والد عن ولده ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق فلا تغرنكم الحياة الدنيا ولا يغرنكم بالله الغرور إن الله عنده علم الساعة وينزل الغيث ويعلم ما في الأرحام وما تدري نفس ماذا تكسب غدا وما تدري نفس بأي أرض تموت إن الله عليم خبير. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Alhamdulillah, for those who are just arriving, we're going to be continuing with our guest speaker, Dr. Abdullah from Zaytuna College. So, نتفضل يا دكتور عبد الله.
So Sheikh Abdullah is going to continue with his lecture, and then at 9 o'clock we'll have Q&A. So تفضل Sheikh Abdullah.
So again, we know that Islam means submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam doesn't mean peace, but it brings peace. Of course, you know the word for peace is as-salam. And one of the things that we paused on was related to the importance of not allowing our lack of discipline, our lack to become a means for impious actors to take advantage of us. So one thing we can talk about, of course, is our appetite for food, drink, and then for sexual gratification, and how we're exploited because of that. You know, we watch television, cable, and the commercials come on. They know exactly what they're doing. You know, you want this. Even if you don't, they figure out a way to tap into your appetite, to tap into your sense or your desire to have more, because this is very human. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "Lo kana ibn Adam wadiyani min mal labtagha thalithan." That the son of Adam, if he had 2 valleys of wealth, he would want a third. وَلَا يَمْلَأُ جَوْفَ ibn Adam illa turab. But the only thing that's going to fill the interior of the son of Adam is soil. Meaning when you go into the ground, you're dead and buried, the only thing that's going to fill you up is that dirt. That's it. Right? Because our nature is to want more. We get one thing, it's brand new, we enjoy it for a time, we grow tired of it, and then we want something else new, right? And the same thing happens with that. The cycle repeats itself, right? And so advertisers are very much attuned to this. So that's with regard to appetite, but what emotions as well? The same thing with our emotions, our anger, our fear, our anxieties, our hatreds, that if we don't have good control over those things, then they can manipulate you in other ways, as they typically manipulate so many people through anger and hatred in politics. And they tell you, well, you can't vote for that person. That person doesn't like your kind. And you say, whoa, for real? Really? Well, I don't like him either. I'm not voting for him. Right? And it may not be true. Often it's not true. And so those who actually have true power, they get what they want. Or they do it through fear. Let's start with, for instance, 9/11, what they did to the American public with 9/11. And again, I'm not one of those people who says that Muslims didn't do it or didn't have anything to do with it. It's possible that Muslims had something to do with it. It's very much possible that Muslims flew airplanes into the buildings and whatever hit the Pentagon. We don't really have any video of that. But at any rate, Muslims were blamed for that. And then they passed sweeping legislation in America, the Patriot Act, et cetera, all this other thing, because now they stirred up fear of, an outsider, right? And all of these conservatives and Democrats as well. It wasn't just the conservatives, it was everybody. They said, let's pass the Patriot Act. And it was passed easily, right? And that same Patriot Act now is being utilized against the very people who helped them pass it. Whether we realize it or not, or want to acknowledge it or not, that Christians are a big target, a major target now, right, in America. That the government is targeting Christians. They're being persecuted utilizing the same act, right? All you have to do is do your homework to know that to be true. Some may find that strange to hear, but it is true. It is very much true. But again, they can utilize fear to do it. But even more than something like terrorism, COVID is another thing they can use. Again, the fear of COVID. If you're afraid of death, you're afraid of getting ill or sick, and something, again, I'm not saying it's not real, but just think about this, is that, what if it wasn't? But it's like, you can't see it, they tell you it exists. Get your act together. Put on the mask. Stand 6 feet apart. Don't visit grandma. And you're so fearful, so afraid. And you don't question anything. You don't question the origins. You don't question the logic of the protocols, whether or not actually is preventing anything from getting through the mask, or what is 6 feet to, why is everyone else in the whole planet doing 3 feet? We're here in America doing 6 feet. Why is it that that they tell me if I sneeze that the particles can go up to 30 feet from my body and everything? What is 6 feet going to do? Why not 30 feet? Right? Yeah. In other words, just being critical, you lose the ability to be critical, right, of the situation, to even discern whether or not what you're being told is actually real. We had an incident in San Bernardino some years ago, and the eyewitnesses to that event, they said that they saw 3 white men in military fatigue. It's hard to find these videos on YouTube. I have them downloaded to my computer, so I have the evidence, for this. There was one guy, Juan Hernandez, who had been questioned by the news, and he said, well, yeah, there's a black sort of Bronco type of vehicle come out. Yeah, these white guys in army fatigue, black army fatigue, they came out, got it and drove off. And then Sally Abdul-Majid was interviewed. I believe it was, I can't remember, it was CBS or ABC. I think it was CBS. She was interviewed. She worked at the office. And when the reporter asked her, well, what did you see? She said, I saw there were 3 well-built white men with white skin and everything, and black army fatigue. 3 men. And then they go through this and comes to the end of the report, and he says, well, actually, we've confirmed that there were only 2, and one of them was a woman. Okay, well, she was there. She saw it. She knows how many were there. She knows what they look like, and you're going to tell us that there were only 2 and one of them was a woman. And again, the point being that when you are afraid, and you don't have control of your emotions, when you don't have control of your appetites, then you are subject to great manipulation. Did the trade towers fall? Did they fall because of fuel that poured out of the airplanes and made the beams weak, and then all of a sudden the entire structure fell all the way to the ground at free fall speed? Or were there explosions? Again, you can find evidence of the survivors. We heard then there was another explosion, then there was another explosion. There are videos of this. Again, hard to find it when you search social media. So in other words, the point being that we live in a very dangerous world. And the principle of asking these type of questions come from our own tradition. That we ask questions about the credibility of the narrator, about their retention capacity, about their moral integrity. That we are concerned for those things. Our scholars, they're giving us these tools. We ask first principle questions, right? If a claim is made, who's the source? Let's evaluate the source. Is this person a pious person? Does this person believe in a reckoning in the hereafter? Is this person known in the community to be an upright individual? And then even if they are they known to be accurate in what they convey? And then we move on. Is there any corroboration? Are there other people out there like this person who were there at the incident as well? In other words, that goes part and parcel with the Islamic sciences and studies. And those ideas originate from the Quran itself, right? So in other words, when we start talking about what Islam has to offer humanity, and we should be thinking about that. We need to be thinking about that. What does Islam have to offer humanity? Right? I mean, we have to move beyond the days of telling non-Muslims that, well, we're just like you all. There are a lot of Muslims, and there's some bad Muslims, there's some good Muslims. Just like there are bad Christians and good Christians, there are bad Jews and good Jews. No, let's move beyond that and come back to, again, the acknowledgement that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees the members of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as distinct, as something better than the rest, but only if you live up to the conditions and to the characteristics. That's why when Allah in the Quran says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas," that you are the best ummah, the best nation brought out for humanity. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهُونَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. You enjoin what is good, forbid what is wrong, and you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only that you believe in Allah, but you enjoin what is good, you forbid what is wrong. He mentioned believe in Allah last, not that it's the least important, but in terms of what makes you the best ummah, it has much to do with you enjoining good and forbidding wrong. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? And then Umar ibn Khattab, he said of this verse, "Man arada an yakuna min hadi ummati falyu'addi shartallahi fiha," that whoever wants to be included as part of this ummah, then let him fulfill the conditions listed in this verse. Fulfill those conditions, then you'll be the best of the ummah. Khairun nas anfa'un nasi linnas, the best of people, the most beneficial of people to people. Right? This is what we're taught. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen, the ummah of Muhammad. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. And thus we made you a justly balanced nation, or a just nation, a moderate nation, so that you would be witnesses over humanity, and that the messenger would be a witness over you. This is what the Quran teaches us. So we're not just like them. At least we're not supposed to just be like them. No. And again, and not out of any arrogance, because every individual, every human being qualifies for Islam. anyone can become a Muslim, right? The door is open to everyone. We as Muslims, as a group, have no right to close the door. We can't. Even if we attempt to close the door, Allah's door is always open for all of his servants, Muslims and non-Muslims. It's open, right? So as we live, we go through life and we live in places which are not our original homes, especially in those situations that while the urge to fit in, the urge to kind of go along with the program is very strong, I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not allow us to just secularize, right? Because that's fundamentally what it means, is to secularize. In other words, Islam is for the private realm. Religion is for the private realm. You know, it's not for the public realm. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he places a human value on every single human action. That everything that you do is either haram, wajib, mandub, mustahab, or mubah. Right? Everything, and that it doesn't matter where you're involved. If you're in medicine or you're in engineering, in mathematics, in economics, psychology, philosophy, it's whatever you're teaching, right? Whatever you're doing, you're a construction worker. It doesn't matter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has a value that he assigns to every single thing that a human being does. And for that particular reason, there's no such thing as you doing your Islam in private and you doing something else in public. There's no such thing as that type of distinction. So we have to recover a sense of mission. And I'm not saying that this means that every single Muslim needs to go out and give da'wah, because not everybody can give da'wah, right? Because you have to learn Islam first and foremost, But if we could at least learn self-mastery, mastery over our appetites, mastery over our emotions, we'll become like the very people who colonize, we can say, the Muslim world. Because this is one thing we forget. Practically every single country in the world today that we consider to be a Muslim country only became a majority Muslim country over the past 2 or 3 centuries. For most of Islamic history, Muslims ruled these lands as minorities. And they were able to rule those lands as minorities because the people of those lands, they looked at the Muslims, they looked at Muslim character and said, you know what, these people are different from us. I trust these people to rule over us, especially better than the leaders we have right now, that we prefer the Muslims to rule us than these other tyrants, right? And so they saw something in these Muslims. They saw something in their character. Muslims didn't go there and say, hey, here are 10,000 translations of the Quran into Persian or translations of the Quran into Turkish. No, that's not what and read those books and let us know what you think about it. No, that's not how they became Muslim. That's not what it was, right? That people, they looked at the power that your beliefs had on you. And so you were the proof. You were the proof. You were the Quran, right? That you were the proof that Islam was the truth. Right? If it could transform you that way, then it should be able to do the same thing for us. And even if we don't convert ourselves, at least those people ruling over us will make our societies better, right? So we have to have an attitude along those lines, and we return to this. And there's nothing, or should be nothing problematic about it. But at any rate, I think you wanted to open up for questions, and hopefully, inshallah, I can provide some additional clarity if necessary. Barakallahu fikum.
Dr. Ali, what that inspired self-mastery is my takeaway.
Inshallah.
Before we open it up for Q&A, we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Ali for 2 more sessions, once in October and once in November as well, to carry on the discussion. So inshallah, I'll open it up, facilitating Q&A if anybody has some questions.
There are plenty of verses in the Quran that talk about the concept of what we call tazkiyah, sort of his purification. The Quran mentions that Allah has conferred an enormous blessing upon the believers, that He sent among them a messenger, يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ, that recites to them the signs of God. He purifies them and He teaches them the book and the wisdom. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, the one who purifies himself or his soul succeeds. وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَاهَا, and the one who debases his soul and pollutes his soul fails. Right? So these are things in the Quran, that is a repeated theme throughout the Quran. That you can find it in many different surahs or chapters in the Quran. So it's not just like a single verse. Of course, one of the most common verses is sort of the Shams that people, sort of recite, the sun. Surah Al-Mu'minun, the chapter on the believers. There are multiple verses in the Quran that talk about whether there's true signs of a believer. الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ, those who are humble and focused in their prayers. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, those who turn away from vanities. الَّذِينَ هُمْ لِلزَّكَاةِ فَاعِلُونَ, those who pay charity. Etc. And it goes on. Those who protect their private parts, except for with their spouses, etc., etc. So there are a lot of different things. Those who fulfill their oaths, those who fulfill their contracts. There are multiple descriptions given for what a true believer looks like, right, in the Quran. And so one thing perhaps you can do is to maybe go through the list of things and say, well, do I fulfill this? And if I have, then move on to the next one. And the thing that's beautiful about the Quran is that there's no Muslim who's ever going to be able to say, I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all. But it definitely puts you on the path. Yeah. Okay.
So as a Muslim, do I have to do da'wah? Like, is Allah will judge me in the day of I'm gonna be punished that I'm in a non-Muslim country, that I didn't send a message about da'wah.
Yeah. Well, the ulama say that the hukm, the ruling of doing da'wah is fard kifaya, meaning it's communal obligation, fundamentally meaning that if some Muslims are not doing it,